Hello, and welcome back to Unconditional, a podcast from Transcend with Love. Well, next week is Halloween, and so I decided to put a little spin on it and to dress up for the podcast. I decided to dress up as an angel because I'm titling this episode A Blessing in Disguise. I'm going to be talking about my son when he came out and just everything that led to it. I know I've discussed it a little bit before, but next week is also the anniversary, the 10th-year anniversary of when I walked in on my son attempting to take his own life. So it's a little darker of a subject, and I'm 10 years out. So a few years ago, I wouldn't be able to sit here talking about it without like crying and bawling. But 10 years later, I've seen such a difference in him, and he's doing great. So I am just so grateful that I actually can see the blessing in everything that happened. So here I am, your angel for the day. I hope you enjoy today as much as I enjoy talking about it. So yes, next week on October 30th is 10 years that I walked in on my son attempting to take his own life. At this point, he was still my daughter. He was 15. He had been struggling with cutting for a few years, and this was not the first time that I knew of an attempted suicide. We had already taken him to Clarity, a wonderful place in San Antonio for 17 and younger. At least that's what it was 10 years ago. I'm thinking it's still the same. So we had taken him there back in May, and October 30th, here it comes again. But this time the difference was I actually walked in on him. I walked in, he was in the closet. I believe I've talked about this, but for those that haven't seen my previous podcast, he was in the closet. I walked in as he was trying to slit his wrists. As much as I had attempted to take everything out of his room and out of the house that I thought could be used as a weapon, he was quite resourceful, and he found an old pencil sharpener with and he took out the rusted blades. The only, I guess, good thing or blessing, one of the blessings, is that it was old, and so it didn't cut very well. The worst thing he could have gotten was tetanus, I believe. But still, walking in on that was difficult. It was very difficult to actually see it. It's one thing to know your child is thinking it, but it's another thing to actually walk in and see the action and the hopelessness in his eyes. I call it a blessing now. I do. And let me real quick, I refer to my son as my son. Back then he was my daughter. However, it's been about 8 years since he came out. So I'm pretty much very used to calling him my son now. So I'm not trying to confuse people, but I will keep referring to him as my son. But that's how he was born a female at birth, or assigned female at birth, as it is said. So that day, it was October 30th, 2013, and I walked in on him. I say it was a blessing because my immediate mama bear instincts kicked in, and I think they stayed that way for many years. It wasn't until 2 years later that he came out as trans, and that was a blessing in itself because it filled in a lot of blanks. I was still so confused, and I was still not understanding the suicide attempts and the cutting, because at the time that I walked in on him, we had already had the conversation of him telling me that he was a lesbian. And well, we handled it very well. I kind of expected it. I kind of sort of already knew in my own way. As parents, we kind of know our kids, and we know when something's off, or I just had an inclination. So it was no big deal to me. I was, okay, that's great. I love you. I'm glad you were able to tell me. Thank you so much for trusting me. So then when the cutting and the suicide attempts and the depression kept going, I didn't understand why. So when he came out as trans, it did fill in a lot of blanks for me. Yes, I was still very confused. As I've mentioned before, I was extremely confused about the whole situation. That one I did not see coming at all. But it was a blessing in disguise. it allowed me to have a closer peek into the turmoil he had going on inside of him, being able to, or not being able to fully say his truth. So even though at first it was very difficult, and it could still be very difficult, there's some great days and there's some, difficult days. Overall, it gave me a why. Okay, I get it. Now I understand why he's been so unhappy. Why, even though he's gotten all of the support from us on everything else, he was still terrified because he still also didn't understand what was happening. I will tell you that the person I was 10 years ago and the person I am now is a completely different person. We were always told that life humbles you. And boy, has it humbled me. This was one of the ways. I was a very righteous person. I was never hateful. I was always kind of curious about the LGBT community. I just loved them. I just thought they were loving and fun, and I would gravitate towards them a lot. But in my mind, I believed certain things, and I was very righteous about it. So much so that looking back, I feel bad because there was so many things that I said and did without realizing it that definitely gave my child the impression that he wasn't safe telling me who he was. I remember I used to be a huge, Grey's Anatomy's fan. And when they started having the lesbian relationship on there, I stopped watching it. I did. More as a principle thing. I had my kids stop watching certain things on ABC Family. I believe that was the channel back then, where it was showing some lesbian relationships. And I was like, no, you can't watch this. So I can totally see how my child could have felt unsafe and scared, thinking that I was going to reject him. And I think back now, and I regret saying those things. Yes, at the time, we all do what we can with what we know at the time. And at the time, I thought I was doing what was best for my child. And I'm speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for anybody else. I wish I would have been a little more, even if I had, even in what I was believing, and even if in knowing, how I felt about that situation, I could have been a little more loving about it, because if I would have known back then what I know now, that my child was falling under the LGBTQ plus umbrella as a trans man, I would have worded things differently. I probably wouldn't have been like, nope, you can't watch this. This is bad. Maybe I would have said something like, okay, this is what this is. I'm not necessarily agreeing with it. This is why I don't agree with it. But please know that I love you. And if you ever feel, if you feel this inside of you, and this is who you are, then please know that you can always come and talk to me. Like there's a way to do it in a way where you can be adamant and convicted about your beliefs and your your way of life, let's say, without condemning someone else's. Because as I am the example, you never know when the person you're condemning and the person you're saying horrible things about, or maybe, and obviously, unintentionally saying horrible things, but being taken horrible by the person that feels that way, can be someone under your own household that needs your love and acceptance and is terrified. So when I say it's been a blessing in so many different ways. It has helped me recognize that there's always other perspectives. There's always a different side of the story. It's never one way. There's always more than one way. And it really is how we come to accept it, or how we come to deal with it, that matters. We are not going to change each other's minds. If I had tried to sit there and try to change my son's mind and tell him that no, that he was a girl and he was always going to be a girl, that God doesn't make mistakes, and go into all of that, I would have built such a bridge and such a gap. I would have burned a bridge between my son and I and any relationship we could have had. And And the relationship we have now is wonderful. It's one of a typical mother and son. He doesn't call as much as I'd want to. He kind of does his own thing. He's 25, so I'm proud of him. But it's normal, what I would consider normal and average. And I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do that if I had, or to have that with him if I had handled it differently. It allowed me, another blessing is it allowed me to really, really dig down deep and figure out what unconditional love really is. It's so easy. As soon as, it's so easy to tell someone that you love them when you actually love them, obviously. Some people say it and they don't mean it, but I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about actually loving, especially when you have your child. As a mother, when my first child was born, I thought at that moment I knew unconditional love. At least I thought I did. Did I know a love? Did I begin feeling a love that I had never felt before? An all-encompassing love that I would actually give my life for another human being. Yes, that was an immediate, from the moment I found out I was pregnant, it was just this amazing love and caretaking of nothing is going to ever hurt you love. But when you find out that you're pregnant and you have a child, I'm really doubting that anybody's sitting there thinking, oh, this child might be transgender. And if so, let me see how I'm going to handle that. No. We think the typical dreams. We think, okay, oh my God, I have this beautiful daughter. She's gorgeous. Look at her. She's going to be this. She's going to be that. I can't wait to have her. She gets married, walking down the aisle in her white, beautiful dress, being a grandma to her babies, being there in the delivery room, you name it. You have all of these dreams and wishes for your children that you impose on them, because you're imposing on them the wishes and dreams that you've always wanted for yourself. And you know that would make you happy. So of course that's going to make them happy, regardless of if your child is transgender or not. I mean, that obviously we know as parents doesn't work, because our kids very rarely want the exact same thing that we want and are not made happy by the same things that make us happy. Add another level and put your child now is transgender, non-binary, or under the rainbow. And it's just things that you don't think about. I didn't, I never thought about it. I have a hard time thinking that anybody would be thinking that way. But there might be, I don't know. So yeah, I mean, so you have these expectations and you go into it and you say you love this child unconditionally. You say you do, and you mean it. You mean it. At the time you're saying it, you absolutely mean it. I mean, I did. I'm like, what else is unconditional love if I would actually die for this child? But when you get thrown something like this that goes against everything you knew and everything you thought and everything you were taught, and it completely just drops like a bomb in your life and just makes everything just kind of explode, that's when the real test of unconditional love comes in. We try so hard to make our kids be who we want them to be, because we want what's best for them. We do. We want what's best for them. We want them to be this ideal citizen, productive citizen, a loving and caring, God-fearing child. At least, for us that are, that have faith in God. Or if you don't, then have a faith in either a greater good or however your beliefs are. You want your child to be the best person that they can be, the person that they were made to be. So then when this gets thrown on you, at least with me, immediately it caused me to question everything. It question everything I had been taught, everything that I had been told, question the love that I had for my child. Not that I was questioning if I loved them. I absolutely love them. But as a parent, my job is to guide them. My job is to make sure that they're walking in the right path. in my case, that they were walking in God's path. While I was very, was raised Catholic and was raising my children in the Catholic religion. And so, doing all the sacraments and the baptismal, and the confession and everything. So getting to the point where everything you've been teaching your children, everything you believe in, comes to a halt because what they now tell you is not accepted. I think that's where the question of unconditional love comes in and what that looks like. It doesn't look like this for everybody, but what it looked like for me was I embraced him virtually because he wasn't there with me when I found out, but embraced him and told him I loved him. And at the same time, I then tried to figure out my own understanding of what was going on. When I say I was humbled because at that point now I could see such a different perspective. Maybe not that exact time, but within the last 8 years, I have been able to get a perspective of the other side. All of these things that I thought for sure were right or were what I believed, I started questioning him because to me, God does not make any mistakes. And he made my child exactly the way that he was, including being transgender. And I still believe that. Some people might agree with me, some people might not, and that's okay. We don't all have to agree, but that's what I believe. And so in doing so, I was able to learn that unconditional love for me was regardless of my questions, regardless of my beliefs, regardless of the emotional turmoil that and just all the stuff that was going on inside of me, there was no doubt that I loved my child and I wanted what was best for him. What that looked like for us was us supporting him, going to support groups, making sure that he had other people around him that he could ask questions to. I remember I wanted so much to ask him questions, but I was scared too. I was scared because I didn't want to offend him. I also didn't know what to ask, what was appropriate, what was not appropriate. I know this is a big deal. Like, what do we say? Especially right now with the whole cancel culture. If we say something wrong, we're going to get canceled and people are going to think that, we're bigots and all this stuff. Well, the problem with that is that it doesn't allow us, it doesn't give us the grace and permission to ask the questions that we want to ask to learn. How else are we going to learn about what our child is going through unless we actually sit there and ask questions? I made a friend, through a friend, I was introduced via social media to a transgender man that was maybe about 5 years older than my son. So with his permission, with my new friend's permission, I began asking him questions about the transgender journey and his journey to give me an insight. And I remember eventually I got some courage and I would ask my own son stuff. And I look back at some of the things I asked him and I'm a little embarrassed about it now, but I'm glad I had the courage to bring it up because it opened up a dialogue. I remember one time just flat out asking him, "Are you sure you're not just a very butch lesbian?" And he looked at me kind of like, "I feel sorry for you that you're asking me this," but at the same time, like kind of trying to have grace with me when he was like, "No, that's not it. You don't understand what I'm saying." And then we started talking about that. And then it made some things make sense. He had always been shy about, he didn't like going shopping at all, which, as a girl, I mean, my youngest daughter would love shopping. So whenever we would go, he was always very like, no, he didn't like trying on clothes. He didn't like fitting rooms. And at one point we went to the store after I found out he was trans and we needed to buy him new clothes. And so we went in there. I'm not going to name the store, but he went in and he was going to go into the men's dressing room. And whether people agree with this or not, this is what he felt comfortable doing. And I made sure, as a mom, I made sure that, we went during a time where there wasn't a lot of people. So there really wasn't anybody in there, or there wasn't anybody in there exactly, but he still would not go into the dressing room because he didn't feel comfortable going into the female's dressing room because to him, he's a man. So he felt that it was inappropriate for him to go to the females' dressing room because of who he was. But at the same time, him at that time going into the men's dressing room or wasn't seen, he hadn't started any type of hormone treatment. So he still looked like a female. So it was just very uncomfortable for him. So he wouldn't do it. So we had to buy clothes, all different kind of clothes, and come home. He would try them on, and then I would return what he didn't like. And at that point, it hit me because I asked him exactly like, is this why you've never wanted to try on clothes? And he was crying and he said, yes. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, I get it. I understand the turmoil. Well, I don't understand it because I've never lived it, but I can see it in you and the turmoil and the pain that you're going through just to try on clothes. And at that point, it broke my heart. It broke my heart. And I realized how much about my child I didn't know. I didn't know. And I'm so grateful that I was given the opportunity to know him as who he is, who he wants to be, or who he not wants to be, who he is, and who he was born to be, and that we were able to manage that communication. If he had never come out as trans, I don't know if I would still be that righteous person I was before. Probably, because a lot of times it takes something major like that to change us to our core. Because unless it affects us, then why would we change? So what affects us more than our kids? I saw that today is actually National Transgender Child Day. I'm trying to remember exactly what how it's said, but it was something that was started in 2019, and it's more so of an awareness of transgender children that are having a difficult time telling their parents that they are transgender. I didn't go through that. My child came out when he was 17. I have met people and families who have children that from a very young age were telling them who they were. I don't know enough about that subject to talk about it, but I do know that that's today. So I wanted to bring it up because there are parents who are struggling, and it's a big struggle. Finding out that your child is saying that they're trans at a young age is a very different struggle than when your child is old enough now to make their own decisions. And there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of debate. There's a lot of medical debate and sides to it. And I'm not here to do that. I'm just here to show love and support to the parents that are going through that. It is very difficult. I can't imagine what you're having to decide. All I can give advice is be the most authentic you can be to yourself. Follow your gut, follow your intuition, and do what you think is best for your child. Obviously, therapy. That I am a big proponent of therapy. Go find a therapist that's good for your child, one that's good for you, and a family therapist. I've spoken about this before. Family therapy is the best thing you can do. I regret not having family therapy as one of our processes in the journey, but I am very grateful that we are still come together. We still have a lot of healing to do, but I'm very grateful. Another blessing that I think came out of this is that I was able to see my children in completely different lights. Each one of my kids is very unique. They have their own just brightness and talents and beauty. And they're amazing. And before this, I was so stuck on your typical, what is everybody going to think? I need to have the perfect house. I need to have, the perfect car, the perfect family, the suburban life. And I was killing it. I was a planner for my entire time I can remember. My life was planned out until nothing came out the way I had planned it. I think I had like up to plan E, and all of those went down the toilet. So I was able to see that each of my children are different, and I love them each individually, exactly who they are. They do not follow the norm, if there ever is a norm anymore in our world, in our society, in our world. Each one of them has their own unique gifts, and I'm so proud of all of them. So I mean, this subject has a lot of emotions in it. There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of joy, there's a lot of pride, there's a lot of sadness and anger and resentment. And there's just so many different feelings that it could easily be seen as a horrible time in someone's life. And at the moment, it feels that way. But me, 10 years out from the suicide attempts and 8 years out from my son coming out, it's been such a blessing. It really has. I am now able to talk about this out of love and healing and wanting to help other people that have been there, because it takes a while to go through that journey. It's a journey for the entire life, really. Next month and November and December are holidays. We'll be talking about that next, in the next couple of weeks, and that's difficult in getting the family involved. So let's try to see each day as a blessing. I see it as a blessing because I still have my child who wanted to die 10 years ago, almost to the day, who looked at me so helplessly and hopelessly, wanting to end their life, having so much hurt and pain that they would rather just not be here. To having a son now who is loving life and a family. My children are all healthy and they're yes, they're struggling. They're finding their way in life like we all do, which is perfect. This is life. This is what we're here for. We're here to the good and the bad, the ups and the downs. That's what makes life beautiful. So I'm here saying that it could be a great thing if we allow it to be. Having that relationship with our children is what we need to aim for. And I am so grateful that my children are all here and that my son is alive and healthy, because 10 years ago, I almost lost him. So with that, I'm going to leave you guys. Thank you so much again for coming or for watching today and listening. I hope you get something out of this. And if any of this resonated with anybody, or someone or someone that might have a need to listen to this, please share this with them. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, like my Instagram posts and my Facebook posts, like my YouTube, and please just share it all to everybody, because you never know who needs to see this. With that, I want you guys to have a wonderful week. I look forward to speaking to you next week. Have a great one. Goodbye.